Good afternoon. It's Dr. Gershon. I'm here with another BetterHealth webinar with really an outstanding visionary CEO in Yuri Deigin. We're going to be talking today about longevity medicine. And I am really thrilled to be here because this is part of a series of webinars looking at longevity medicine, gene therapies, really in the context of the next chapter in medicine. And there are various points within the history of medicine where there are these step changes. Yuri really is a leader, a visionary, and quite courageous in the things that he's doing to promote this field of medicine. You will also hear later in October from Alex Zhirankov, who is the CEO of In Silico Medicine, another in these series about longevity. And I hope today that this is an inspiring conversation because BetterHealth is all about patients, patient outcomes, and the future of medicine as being changed by great leaders like Alex, like Yuri, coupled with amazing science and technology that we've never seen before. So first, as I always do, I want to thank everyone for coming here today, taking part in the BetterHealth open source platform, which is a chance really for terrific leaders to come together and speak about the things that are impacting the healthcare system, and most importantly, the things that potentially can impact you as a patient. This is an open source platform, really the first of its kind, to be able to collaborate and partner with great leaders. So I encourage everyone here, first, log in. Tell us where you're logging in from. If you have a particular question, please include your email in that question so we can respond if we can't get to the question today. And most importantly, if you have thoughts or comments that can help Yuri and his company in his quest to grow and scale and commercialize his products through partnerships and collaborations, please reach out to him and or to me. It's part of the core of what we're doing here together in BetterHealth. I want to also just talk about the structure a little bit about BetterHealth because it will be changing in the fall. We have had tremendous success in terms of the podcasts and the interactions. In terms of the webinars. In terms of the fall, we're going to actually be extending that out into podcasts, which are 15-minute versions where speakers like Yuri and others who have already brought some information to you and to the audience are going to be able to follow up in short but poignant messages. And so we look forward to rolling that out. Jenny Fernandez, who is our Director of Communications and Leadership, is going to be taking the point on that, and I'm excited about partnering with many organizations where we're going to be doing live events, including events from the New York Stock Exchange. So without further ado, I'm going to really introduce you and turn the mic over to Yuri, who is sitting patiently, and I know that he and I, before the webinar started, began this very dynamic conversation. So let's pick up where we left off. Yuri, please tell us a little bit about yourself, your vision for this company, how you got started, and what you are doing now as a starting point with the exciting things that are embedded in the technology in your company.
Sure, and thank you first and foremost for inviting me to the webinar. It's a great pleasure to share with you what we're doing at YouthBio and talk about gene therapies and patient outcomes and really the future of medicine. And I think longevity, which what we represent as a company, I think longevity is the future of medicine. I think this is where we're going with trying to prevent diseases, prevent age-related diseases, and age-related diseases are the biggest source of pain and suffering and patient death in the world, between heart attacks, cardiovascular diseases, cancer, and dementias. I think they represent over 90% of causes of death for people worldwide, especially in developed countries. And so by going after the root cause, the aging process, we're trying to prevent these diseases from occurring in the first place, or at least initially delaying their onset, giving people more healthy years of healthy life. And ultimately, I think we would like to prevent those diseases from happening at all. And yeah, this is the future of medicine, where it's going. And we are developing gene therapies that eventually will target aging at its root cause. Initially, we're targeting existing diseases like Alzheimer's, for example. I mentioned dementias being one of the more unpleasant manifestations of aging. And we're using a particular approach called partial reprogramming, where we're trying to activate reprogramming factors via gene therapies that we deliver to the cells. So we activate reprogramming factors to rejuvenate the underlying cells, and so thereby rejuvenate the underlying organs, and initially prevent the onset of, for example, Alzheimer's that we're targeting, and ultimately, hopefully, even reverse the symptoms of Alzheimer's or other diseases that we plan to target. And eventually, our vision is to create a comprehensive therapy targeting multiple organs that will result in systemic rejuvenation, systemic decrease of biological age, systemic slowing down of the aging process that will yield those many years of healthy life that I mentioned in the beginning, and eventually, hopefully, even stop the aging process from happening in the first place. Of course, this is still far away, but right now we're focusing on the first steps, which are to delay particular age-related diseases from happening in the first place. And so we're using a gene therapy approach to accomplish this. And I think in the context of longevity medicine, this is the most promising approach. Partial reprogramming and gene therapies that deliver the reprogramming genes, to me, is the most promising approach we have right now in longevity.
Fantastic overview. I want to take a step to the side first, because you're a modest person, but tell us about your background. Tell us about the people that you're working with and how that came together to be in the position that you're in as an entrepreneur.
Sure. Thank you very much for very kind words. I've been a drug developer for over a decade, or close to 15 years now. And initially just working on particular age-related diseases, trying to essentially play whack-a-mole with the aging process. In particular, was working on Alzheimer's, and Alzheimer's is really a personal passion of mine, because it runs in the family. My grandma passed away from Alzheimer's, and ultimately just came to realization that aging is the driving process behind Alzheimer's, and not only that, behind all age-related diseases. And if I wanted to really make a difference in preventing those diseases, in preventing Alzheimer's, then I should really go after the root cause of it, the aging process itself. And that's how I got into longevity. And initially, I was more on the activist side of longevity medicine, and ultimately was able to combine my passion for longevity with my day job of drug development and start developing actual longevity medicines, longevity therapeutics. And also, I became aware of this partial reprogramming approach back in 2017 with the paper by Professor Ocampo, which really revolutionized the field of longevity and opened the floodgates to reprogramming companies. There's now like a dozen reprogramming companies. Many people might have heard of Altos Labs, which is backed by such visionary investors as Jeff Bezos and Yuri Milner. And there are other companies backed by Sam Altman, for example, Retro, or Brian Armstrong of Coinbase, backed New Limits. So these are all reprogramming companies that were really brought together by this groundbreaking paper in 2016 by Professor Ocampo, Ocampo and others out of the Salk Institute, showing that you can use this approach of reprogramming in vivo. You can use it safely, and you can use it effectively, as it prolonged lifespan in the mouse model that they use, progenitor mouse model, by up to 50%. And that was what prompted me to also start translating this paradigm, creating gene therapies based on this paradigm, because I had that kind of sense of urgency that because I know it takes about a decade to go from bench to bedside, and it takes a while for drugs to come to patients. And I didn't really want to wait, for too long, because I wanted these therapies to be available to everybody, to myself and all my loved ones. And so that's as soon as I heard about this approach, I wanted to start translating it, and that's what got me into gene therapies and partial reprogramming in particular.
It's such a powerful story. It's the ultimate combination of entrepreneurship, which is, skill sets, creativity, courage, and vision, coming together. Very much like an artist, I look at entrepreneurs as people who don't have a choice. They see something, they have to do it. You have to put paint on that canvas. And, that comes with some short-term gains. You're not opening a store and selling product. And so, as part of what we do here at BetterHealth, and part of the thematic investing and Endeavor, is to recognize this and to support it. And so, part of what we do at Endeavor is our venture studio, which is a funding mechanism for pre-seed, seed, and Series A companies, with a 4-year commitment to companies to fund them through Series B. I think that this is very important for companies like yours and others that are taking bold steps to be courageous. And as part of that process, we bring awareness in an open forum like this and follow it on. And I'd love to invite you formally to these follow-ons, which are usually hybrid events where we have workshops. Bring companies and investors, strategics and corporate accelerators and corporate venture groups all together in Endeavor Shark Tank type scenarios where we look at problem and solution. And I know that there's different problems for different types of companies, but overall, when great people are aligned and they come together, they find solutions in some fashion. So I want to take this moment just to stop for a second, because we have a lot of people who have logged on, and they're part of this process of collaboration and part of the ability for them to reach out with ideas and suggestions. I want to thank, first and foremost, Jenny Fernandez, who's always steadfast and here to support every webinar. Thank you, Jenny, from logging in from New York. And Martin, who's really consistently been a supporter, signing in from Norway. Claudia from Portugal. Mustafa from Turkey. Harvey, welcome. I know that Harvey's going to be on as a prominent speaker in artificial intelligence in December. I'm looking forward to that. Abraham from Nigeria. Andrew, nice to see you from New York. Evan from San Francisco. Claire from Mexico, from New Mexico. Cornell from New York. Guillermo from Argentina. Thank you all for coming and for many of your comments. I'm just going to put this little comment up very quickly. Thank you very much for that. I am a music student. That's how I grew up. So the transition from art to science has kind of been with me for a long time. But thank you for pointing that out. So let's get back to the webinar, and let's talk a little bit about some of the technology, because your story is very moving and poignant. And let's talk about some of this technology which has come out of the research that you mentioned. Can you give us one level deeper about the understanding of how does that fit into what I consider a sweeping change in science, innovation, and technology, which is offering up incredible opportunities? Obviously, artificial intelligence kind of leading that charge. But tell me a little bit about the paper and how that has changed the landscape.
Sure. Yeah, the 2016 paper by Ocampo et al. Basically, it showed that you can safely use these reprogramming factors, Yamanaka reprogramming factors, in vivo in the context of an already formed organism. Because until then, people knew that you can use Yamanaka factors to rejuvenate cells, but only in a petri dish, only in vitro. And basically, once people realized that the reprogramming process rejuvenates cells, they wanted to try it in the context of in vivo ever since. But unfortunately, initial attempts were not successful because animals just died. Like it turned out, if you reprogram cells for too long, those cells stop doing the work that they're supposed to do because they're actually reprogrammed to this pluripotent state, and which means that they're no longer like a skin cell or a liver cell or a brain cell doing its job, and animals died. And so the genius of the Ocampo and others was to figure out the short duration of reprogramming that allowed cells to remain as they are, to remain whatever initial state they were, like, for example, a skin cell or brain cell, but yet to get rejuvenated for a significant proportion of their biological age. And so this is the partial aspect of reprogramming. So inducing reprogramming genes for only partially to allow the rejuvenating process to start, but not yet allow the process of changing cell identity to start. And after they activated these Yamanaka genes in these animals for a duration of basically 2 days of inducing the Yamanaka genes, 2 days of activating the rejuvenating genes, and then allowing 5 days for a washout period, basically stopping the activation of the genes and allowing the animal to recover and basically the reprogramming process to stop. And so this was a periodic protocol under which they activated these Yamanaka genes until animals' end of life, and they showed that by using this approach, they can extend lifespan of these animals by up to 50% relative to control groups. And so they also showed that not only did they extend lifespan, but analyzing the tissues of the animals, the treated tissues, tissues of treated animals showed much better histology. They looked younger than the tissues of mice that were not treated. And this, as I mentioned, just set off a race to translate this paradigm. And by now in this race, we have about a dozen companies that are trying various aspects of reprogramming. And of course, I think we've come a long way from the initial days, from our understanding of how exactly we should be translating this. The initial approach of just using Yamanaka factors for all cells in all tissues, I think we're starting to move away from it with the realization that we really need to be more specific. Different cell types age in different ways. Different cell types have different tolerances of reprogramming, different allowances for how much reprogramming they can tolerate, and also how rejuvenating reprogramming is and what duration of reprogramming is really optimal for a particular cell type. And so I think in the future, this necessitates a much more tailored approach to particular cell types and particular organs. And this is where the field is going to, including ourselves in targeting cells in a specific manner. And also this is what is behind our approach of using therapies for particular organs and particular diseases before ultimately combining them into this comprehensive therapy, combinatorial therapy that I mentioned that targets multiple organs. But before we get there, we have to prove to FDA and other regulators that the therapies are safe and effective in the context of individual diseases and individual organs. And this is what's behind our approach of targeting Alzheimer's, for example, targeting the brain as the stepping stone before we can eventually get to this systemic rejuvenation therapy that healthy people can use to prevent Alzheimer's in the first place, or prevent age-related diseases, in a complex, basically not just one, but prevent most of them or all of them from happening by being able to rejuvenate our organism, being able to lower biological age, and therefore lower the risk of onset of all age-related diseases. And this is our ultimate goal, where hopefully we'll get to within, a decade or two.
Absolutely fantastic. I want to take a moment again to thank everyone, for dialing in. Fausto has a question that I'm going to put on the screen, but I also want to thank Abraham from dialing in, and Nida from dialing in from Menlo Park, Tom from Belfast, George from Texas. Welcome, George. Lucas from Canada. So let me put the question up here.
I just read it in the chat.
Yeah. So great question. Thank you for sharing that with us. I have a dozen questions behind that. So really fascinating conversation.
Sure. Yeah. So basically the question is about the delivery system that can allow us to target particular cell types and avoid others. And right now we're using lentiviral delivery, and we can pseudotype the lentivirus with particular targeting proteins that will be preferential to particular cell types. Also, there are other delivery systems that utilize essentially the same approach. You put a targeting protein that is targeting a particular receptor only found on, for example, neurons or other cells that you want to target and not found in other cell types that you prefer to avoid. And this is one way. Another way, of course, is to even without a particular targeting mechanism on delivery, you can utilize, for example, cell type specific promoters to drive expression only in the cell types of interest. So even you can use a delivery system with wide tropism, for example, just a lentiviral with the VSV pseudotyping, which can end up in multiple different cells or pretty much any cell type, but it will only be expressed if you use a cell type specific promoter. It will only be expressed in a particular cell type that you would want it to be expressed. Ultimately, of course, you can use a two-step mechanism that has both, basically a cell type specific promoter and some sort of cell type specific targeting receptor on the delivery vehicle. And it doesn't have to be a lentivirus. It could be any viral vector or even a non-viral vector. There's a very nice platform from Antos Pharmaceuticals called Fusogenics that we're looking very closely at. And it's essentially LNP-based system where you can have targeting peptides on the surface of the LNPs that can target preferentially particular receptors on cells that you want your cargo to be delivered to.
Is there any limitation in terms of areas in the body or physiology? So, for example, are you able to deliver these gene therapies to across the CNS, for example? I would imagine yes, with a virus, and also, are you able to penetrate under vascularized areas, or are there any particular limitations or areas that are kind of heavily burdened with adipose tissue, or other factors that might inhibit some type of either penetration or expansion?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, viral delivery has multiple issues with penetration and the uneven distribution of the vector, and definitely the liver is the organ that usually gets most of the therapy delivered to it, and there are other tissues with more preferential tropism to viral vectors, and that's why you have to have additional targeting or preventative mechanisms to avoid expression, for example, in the liver, because you really don't want your cargo to be expressed in the liver. And the brain definitely is a challenge because of the blood-brain barrier. There's some vectors like AAV9 that can cross BBB successfully, and others cannot. You can solve the brain delivery by delivering, for example, intracranially or into the CNS, for example, a CSF fluid. But there's definitely issues right now with delivery to particular tissues, and you have to have specific targeting mechanisms for particular tissues. It's not just like one injection that will perfectly get delivered to all of the tissues in the body. And delivery is a challenge for all gene therapies, and definitely for gene therapies targeting more than one tissue. And thankfully, we're not the only ones with this problem. Pretty much all gene therapy companies have this, trying to figure out delivery, and there's been great progress over the past decade made in delivery, and we are thankful to be standing on the shoulders of those giants and the giants to come to figure out all of these issues and hopefully have optimal delivery for a particular organ that we're targeting. But it's definitely going to be a combination of different vectors for different tissues that we'll have to apply as a combination therapy. It's not going to be just like one single injection for all of the tissues.
Right. Let me ask you this, which is a more holistic approach. I mean, this sounds For me, what's exciting about this conversation is this is the next chapter. And we're at the preface of the book. We're not even in the first chapter yet.
Absolutely.
So what's exciting for me, as a builder, I consider myself. I've personally started 6 companies, and we've had 69 investments in our first fund. We've got 4 in the studio now. So what motivates me is the process. I like the process towards a long-term goal. And so I want to focus in on, we know what the long-term goal is. You said it very articulately in the beginning of the webinar. But the process is not clear to me. And so I want to take, let's say, I want to pull back a little bit and take a high level view. Things that would be focused in on longevity have been up to now, or let's say over the past, many years up until recent innovation, focused in on things that people can do for themselves. So there's this holistic approach to longevity. We've been certainly researching sleep more and more. We've been researching nutrition more and more. Obviously, exercise for 40 plus years has been on the front burner of research. So for me, the interesting piece in this process that is actionable within most of our immediate lifetimes are some of the things that we can expect, from great companies like yours and some of them that you mentioned, but also the notion that there are people who are in science, in medicine, in wellness, in nutrition, that are looking at some of these things in an adjunctive way. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about that, in terms of, we're this holistic organism, and recent studies, for example, by Bill Gates have looked at alcohol and the toxicity that alcohol has, and their recommendation is, zero tolerance, because alcohol is a neurotoxin, no matter how much, alcohol you take. And this, in contrast to a couple of decades ago, where it was actually recommended, because some of the substances in red wine, to have a glass of red wine every day for cardiac, health. So it's very, very interesting to me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely it's been a little disappointing that alcohol has been downgraded from kind of a longevity intervention, if taking it in small quantities, to being absolutely detrimental at any quantity. And I think this represents a bit of a challenge for the entire field with these interventions that only have a very small effect. And of course, trying to tease out this effect from retrospective studies is an additional layer that adds an additional challenge, because sometimes you might see some associations that you think are causal, but they, like when you actually try them in interventional ways, like vitamin D, for example, they don't actually seem to really pan out, because vitamin D has been showing great correlation with multiple positive outcomes, reduction in, for example, cardiovascular mortality or bone breakage, for example. But when it was tested as an intervention in huge clinical trials with thousands of patients, it actually turned out that effect is pretty much non-existent. That when you actually take vitamin D, increasing your levels of vitamin D in that way do not really provide health benefits. And of course, some people still think that those studies weren't done the right way and are still taking vitamin D. And of course, vitamin D being one of those great medications that has very low risk of taking, some people just recommend to keep taking it. Of course, in reasonable doses. Of course, although there's, it has a very, very huge safety window. So even large doses that some people are taking might not have very high risk. Not that I recommend taking it or not taking it. This is not medical advice, but just as an example of intervention that people put some hope in, and it didn't really pan out. Same with alcohol. Yeah, you're absolutely right that a decade ago, alcohol consumption in moderation seem to have like a bit of a U curve in like at low quantities. It seemed to be protective against various health outcomes, including mortality. But then more recent studies analyzing it had that kind of positive effect disappear, and it seems that any quantity of alcohol is associated with an increased risk. I doubt that we'll see an interventional study anytime soon where people will actually be induced to drink alcohol to measure health outcomes. But then, this would be like the golden standard of clinical study to actually tease out causation. But of course, all of this health benefits we have to measure against how much we're enjoying the life that we're trying to prolong. And you can be a very kind of monk-like person like Brian Johnson, who is very focused on his health and is willing to give up all earthly pleasures like alcohol or some others, and just kind of sleep for 9 hours a day or whatever, and just stay at home and not fly for more than 2 time zones. Or you can be less, maybe balance this with enjoying your life a little bit, but at the price of maybe increasing your risk of some of the health problems that aging brings about. And of course, the problem is that all of these interventions, lifestyle interventions, or vitamins and supplements that are known, they only provide a very small benefit. And this kind of circles back to this my initial reaction in this already a long-winded answer, that unfortunately, all of the things we know right now, they provide only a very marginal benefit to longevity and to health. If we had an intervention that doubles your lifespan, we'd know it right away, and we'd see it right away, and we wouldn't need to produce all of these observational studies and interventional studies. Unfortunately, there isn't anything, and even if you live a very healthy life, you exercise, you don't smoke, you watch your weight, you don't drink, as probably at maximum this will yield, at least by previous estimates, 12 years of additional healthy life, versus a person who does none of those things and really enjoys their life to the fullest. And the I guess therapeutic approach that we're taking and other companies are taking is really trying to find ways to disconnect your lifestyle from the biology and essentially allow you to remain at the health level of a 20-year-old for as long as you want, and the 20-year-olds can enjoy all of those things and not really worry about the health consequences of those things. And biology is obviously able to support these things for a 20-year-old person, and have our systems that allow a person to be so healthy for many years. And the question is, how can we actually, in a therapeutic way, provide the same biological result as we can observe in just during normal development. And that will be the holy grail, creating therapies that people, regardless of their lifestyle, will be able to enjoy and enjoy healthy longevity.
Yeah, I want to end here with a continuation of that thought, which highlights the success, which is spectacular, is not a word that I use inappropriately here, of the whole field of gene therapy. This is highlighted by companies like Bluebird Bio, who have, as you use the word, reprogrammed, individuals with gene therapies for beta thalassemia, for example. These are diseases that companies like Bluebird and CSL and others have targeted, which for the most part are death sentences at some period of that person's life, usually short. So when you talk about reprogramming, and longevity, everybody looks to the impact on billions of people, which is absolutely the end game. But I want to highlight, as a physician and as a scientist, the incredible successes of what has been done for a few people. And so in this rare disease category, I have to applaud government organizations like the FDA, who have overcome tremendous hurdles, tremendous political battles, and regulatory issues to be able to approve. And then Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, for approving reimbursement coding for therapies, which are quite expensive. And so those headwinds are not just scientific, but they're government, they're political, they're regulatory. And we have broken through those barriers just in the past few years with outstanding results. For me, that's the door that opens up all kinds of opportunities for the things that we're talking about now. And instead of focusing in on rare diseases and a few patients, which is laudable, which I support, which I endorse, which I invest in, you are really at the other end of the spectrum, which is the world, effectively. And so I want to really, again, maybe a last thought or comment on that. And then we're going to have to say goodbye, even though I don't want to, and wrap up the webinar.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, aging affects everybody, and ultimately we think everybody should have a chance and an opportunity to live as long and as healthy as they would like, and not be subjected to constraints that biology puts on us of, existing schedule of getting diseases, schedule of getting cancer, schedule of getting heart disease or Alzheimer's. And so that's why our therapies are meant to be helping everybody, slowing down the aging process and maybe even potentially stopping or even reversing the aging process. Ideally, we would love to give people an opportunity to remain healthy for as long as they want. And of course, initially, for example, with Alzheimer's, we're targeting a limited patient population, still millions of people. But ultimately, yes, we would love to. And it's not just ourselves. I think the entire longevity field is after giving everybody in the world a chance to live much longer, much happier, much healthier. And ultimately, it's everybody in the world who can benefit from these therapies.
Well, Yuri, I mean, I could talk with you for hours about this. It's been an incredibly dynamic, informative, and exciting conversation. For me, the wheels are already spinning with questions. I know that other people have questions. Ravi has multiple questions. Please, Ravi, if you could email me, the email is on the screen, endeavor@gershoncapital.com. I'm more than happy to pass them off to Yuri to get you a response. And anybody else that has any further questions, we will have Yuri back on a podcast, over the next several quarters to give us an update about how things are going. Science is changing so rapidly. It's absolutely fantastic to be able to keep a finger on the pulse, and that's what these podcasts are designed to do. I want to thank everyone once again who's tuned into the webinar. You've been incredibly supportive, thoughtful questions. Please continue to come to this platform to discuss and learn about new amazing discoveries. Over the next several weeks, we're going to have some really fantastic featured speakers from companies like Microsoft, from companies like Accenture, from companies like Capgemini on the larger end of things, and some of the emerging companies who are going to be talking to you about some amazing technologies which are looking at voice biomarkers, which are looking at incredible therapeutic discoveries, and which are looking at AI in terms of predictive value and changing the entire landscape for healthcare. So please stay tuned. Yuri, once again, I want to thank you for your time, your thoughtful input. I can't tell you how excited I am about working with you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, and I'm really thankful to you and to Endeavor. What you guys are doing, I think it's very important to bring this collaboration among companies and among people who are really interested in helping move things forward. So really thank you for that, and thank you to everybody who tuned in and asked great questions. And looking forward to being here again.
Fantastic. So long, everyone. Have a great afternoon. Yuri, stay tuned for just a second.
Great. Thanks, everybody.